Hello. What's really good? Today we will be talking about a film that wanted to be like a Nightmare on Elm Street, or it wanted to be better than a Nightmare on Elm Street. Either one that it is nowhere near Elm Street. It's miles away, got the wrong Google Maps directions to Elm Street. It's a whole ass travesty. Much like that joke I started with. This movie, it's not gonna be like that time you thought you bought the newest Marvel movie from one of those illegal street vendors, but when you popped in the DVD, you got this.
There's nothing left to fight for. It's over. Nothing is over. We control our own fate.
Nothing like that, but I can't say it's much better. Don't Panic by writer-director Ruben Galindo Jr. is not exactly the same as A Nightmare on Elm Street. He did change up a lot of the story. He made the main character a boy instead of a girl, which is very progressive of him. He also made it about demonic possession and visions instead of nightmares and dreams and whatever. However, the little bit that he does leave in is entirely too reminiscent of A Nightmare on Elm Street, because as you're watching it, you start thinking about Nightmare on Elm Street, and then you start comparing it to A Nightmare on Elm Street, and then you're like, fuck, maybe I should turn this off and watch A Nightmare on Elm Street instead. So this is a little point about the Elm Street series, or just the original movie. When I was a kid, I wasn't exactly scared by the first movie. There's a lot of campy and silly imagery. That doesn't mean I didn't like it. It's still a classic movie, and it's definitely a movie we would sometimes put on during the Halloween season. As I got older, I did begin to become a bit more scared of the movie. I began to understand the symbolism behind everything and just what Wes Craven intended to do with the whole story. Elm Street is definitely a movie about trauma and PTSD and mental illness. Freddy Krueger isn't just a monster because he's some scary looking supernatural being that kills and that has a glove with these sharp knives attached to it. He's also a monster because he is someone who violated and committed vile acts against children. This mirrors the monsters we deal with in our actual society, who cause PTSD and trauma and all these awful things. The parents are also far from innocent, despite taking the law into their own hands and killing Krueger as some kind of act of vigilante justice when he was unfairly set free. Now, these parents are responsible for trauma themselves and neglect and gaslighting. With Don't Panic, though, there honestly doesn't really seem to be any depth to it as opposed to Elm Street. At first, I did think that it was some kind of an allegory on drug abuse. And at times, I did think it was an allegory on peer pressure and Satanism. But I just felt like I was really trying to look for something deep when there really wasn't. Because after really watching it like a good 5 times, I did come to the realization that I was just, like I said, giving it way too much credit, and that was a total reach. I think I'm rambling at this point. Let's just get right into the nightmare. The movie starts off with some narrative, like exposition from our main character, Michael. This is the only time he narrates, and it's just so they can tell us and not show us why he moved from California to Mexico. Essentially, we need to know why this gringo is in Mexico now. However, Ruben Galindo Jr. was using this movie to target a much paler-skinned American audience. It is Michael's 17th birthday. There's some underage drinking happening. It's also pretty impressive how poppin' it is because he just said he moved there recently. Also, there's terrible ADR immediately, and this is just throughout the entire movie.
It's your first birthday in Mexico? Yeah. You'll get used to it. Come on, guys, let's go.
Sure as hell hope so.
The mess left behind by the party goers is like 90% Coca-Cola cans and 10% balloons. So his mom stumbles out and she's clearly an alcoholic. This is one of those things they directly lifted from Elm Street because Nancy's mom, Marge, is also a raging alcoholic. However, Marge is much more successful of a character and better written. So Michael somehow didn't realize that a good 6 of his friends didn't actually leave his house because they scare the shit out of him as he's about to go to bed. They fucking reveal themselves like they're the cast of Zoom.
6:17, Michael. Big surprise, huh, Michael?
Hey, dude. Another one bites the dust, huh?
We know that this dude Tony, whose eyebrows start like a ½ inch below his hairline, is a total douchebag, and that means he's gonna be a very important part of the movie. They have this seance to summon a spirit named Virgil. We immediately find out Virgil is the devil. And when given the chance to ask this supernatural entity anything, I mean anything, this bitch Debbie asks this whack-ass question.
Ask him what year my grandmother died. Yeah.
But nothing happens. Everyone's like, bruh, Tony, this is whack. And then he goes into like a fucking rage.
Shut up, everybody!
So Michael's mom ends up kicking everyone out, and we get some more exposition because we find out that Michael's father is absent in his life. It's obviously very disappointing for him. And he didn't get to show up to Michael's bitchin' soda and seance birthday extravaganza. We also do find out that Virgil was indeed summoned when they show this scene of a planchette hitting the wall for some reason. The next day, Michael's late for school. The guard doesn't want to let him in, so he bribes him with some good old-fashioned still images of nude women. This will not work today, kids. I've tried, so believe me. Michael sneaks in and he runs into Alexandria, and she too is late and cannot get into her class. Michael convinces her to ditch school and grab some breakfast, and they end up spending the whole day at the park. This scene is where you really get to see the contrast, and I mean literal contrast, between the extras and the main cast. Everyone is much browner. Not to take away from the main cast, because what I was able to find out, they are pretty much all Mexican or Latino. Not really sure about Michael, but I know the rest are. But come on, like, you can really see that this is where Galindo Jr. was trying to cater to the Americanos. Michael looks like the goddamn 80s version of NSYNC era Justin Timberlake. At some point, they're eating like straight up melted ice cream. Michael's like staring at Alex, mouth agape, as if he weren't late due to jacking off to some more explicit images from that porno mag he brought to school. Why are they chewing it? It's practically soup. After dropping Alex off, Michael heads to a very, very hungover Tony's crib. And boy, gotta love the decor here. Nothing says teenager like Marlboro and Coca-Cola. Literally no one decorates like this. There isn't a person in the world who thought or thinks or will ever think it is a good idea to hang Marlboro boxes and Coca-Cola cans from strings and decorate with them. I'm comfortable making this assumption. Tony is all apologetic about being a drunk piece of shit the night before. He says some vague shit about the Ouija board.
Don't think I forgot we had a promise not to say anything about the Ouija board.
I, the viewer, actually want to hear more of what he's trying to say. But Michael interrupts him because he's a horny teenager and just wants to talk about Alex. He's all like, bruh, Alex is feeling the kid. And Tony is all like, yo, you know what you gotta do? You gotta give her a rose, but can't be just any rose. It gotta be the magic rose. And Michael, with no fucking questions about what that even means, is like, word, you right. I'm gonna do that. That's what's up. So that night, Michael is in his oversized bed and he's having a dream, or what seems like a dream. It's actually his first vision. This is another thing that they take from Elm Street. Some Freddy Krueger type shit happens here. The difference between Michael and Nancy shows Nancy and her friends have nightmares. Michael has these visions, and these visions seem to show him a murder happening from the killer's point of view. Another difference between Nancy and Michael specifically is that Nancy's significant other is 80s era Johnny Depp. 80s era Johnny Depp is top tier babe. Sorry, unibrow. Here is where you see Michael in his adult sized dino jammies, and you're going to be seeing a lot of this, and I know it's a turn on, so control yourselves. The next day, Michael and his brownest friend Robert are leaving class, and he got the magic rose on him.
Hey, Michael. Good luck, man.
And this scene reminded me of something.
Hey, Scotty. Jesus, man.
Once in the cafeteria, Michael sees Alex, and she's getting her face all violated by this guy with a real stupid face. So Michael gets upset and he runs off. And then Alex runs after him, and she decides to remedy the situation by telling him this.
I love you.
Okay, guys. If you're in high school, don't do this. There is a 100% chance that you are not in love with the person. Especially when the first 2 times you hung out with them was just at the park while you were skipping school and at a seance. But they end up at Michael's apartment after school. And not only does he wear those weird dino jammies, he hangs up his posters like an absolute madman. This seems to turn Alex on because they proceed to bone. She just knew that's who she wanted to lose her V card to. So later that night, looking like he's on the verge of becoming the J-Man,
What'd you say?
Michael is again in his jammies and his enormous bed that I wish I owned, reflecting on what I guess is the sex he just had. But out of nowhere, another vision hits him, and this time it's of Debbie getting murderfied. If you don't remember who Debbie is, she's the chick with the dumbass question from the seance. Now, this movie does a terrible job at really fleshing out these characters. We only really get to briefly meet them in the beginning. We don't really learn their names, and there's just too many, so you kind of forget. Obviously, this was something that was more successful in Elm Street because we did get to become more familiar with the characters besides Nancy. There's Tina, her best friend, which we meet first, actually. Then there's Rod, and then there's Glenn. Michael takes like a lethal amount of some kind of pill, and he wakes up fully dressed, shades and all. The next day, no explanation. His eyes seem to just be red now, even when he's not having a murder vision. So he joins his mom for some desayuno, and he has another vision/hallucination. This one's a bit different though, because it seems to be kind of more like a premonition as well. And he sees it on the TV screen. It's Tony's face. He comes to the screen and basically warns him that Christy will be the next to be murdered. Christy who? Exactly. I barely knew who Christy was until I saw the movie 3 times. And this is exactly my frustration that I voiced before. Because what the fuck? Michael is shocked and he drops his fork onto his plate of undercooked bacon, I guess. I don't know what the fuck he's eating, but his mom was obviously too tanked to make it correctly. Michael has another similar vision in class, and this time it's his teacher telling him to get Christy out of the city before midnight. I'm gonna go ahead and assume that the devil cannot leave Mexico City because he will be violating his parole. He also sees Christy laughing at him and bleeding profusely. This scene could have been way more unsettling if the actress who played Christy was a better actress, or if it wasn't executed much more successfully here. Michael runs into Alex in the cafeteria where he's getting his lunch of these 2 beverages. And Alex is all hype and she's like, yo, I want you to meet my parents. Michael's all acting weird and distant. She's like, oh no, he's being a fuckboy. And she thinks he's trying to just pipe and dip.
I don't ever Again.
This prompts John, the guy that has the stupid face, and his little like sidekick to fuck with Michael. And then John stomps on Michael's shades with his cool ass Minnetonkas. This dude poorly comes to Michael's defense. Michael goes to the doctor after this, and his eyes seem to be back to normal. His shirt is unbuttoned for some reason. He then tells the doctor about his fucking crazy visions and hallucinations. The doctor tells his mother, like, yo, I think your son, deadass, just like lost his fucking mind. He's a crazy person. And then his mom says this.
I have a drinking problem.
Michael, later that night, overhears his mom on the phone with his dad, and she's like, yo, our son is descending into absolute fucking madness. And she's drinking, which I think is hilarious because she admitted to having a problem, but she just doesn't care to fix it. Michael's back in his jams on a bed. I can only assume he copped at Shaq's yard sale. Also, one pillow. Dude, I would have 20 pillows on that bad boy easily. Pillow forts every night. So the next scene is a certified goodie, one of the top 2 best scenes in this movie. Alex calls for some reason. I guess the D was just that good. I mean, it was her first D, but that was just the only thing she could go off of. Michael ignores the call, and then he goes into a hilarious tantrum, amplified by the jams. He throws this Marlboro thing, of course. He kind of rips up some of these meticulously placed posters. Throws some laundry. He does this, and then this. What's up with this table too? It's so small and dumb. Why is it there? What is its purpose? So the news then gives a very delayed report on the murders of the 2 teenagers that were at Michael's seance birthday bash. Then he realizes that it is all real. He tries to contact Tony, and Tony doesn't pick up. So he's like, yo, I got to get to Christie's now. And it's too late to change my clothes. So I'm going to just throw on some Reeboks and go over there looking like a fucking maniac. Turns out that John is actually Christie's bro. And Michael's trying to warn him of Christie's impending death. John, of course, doesn't believe him because look at dude. Then Michael begins to have like a vision of Christie, and she's at the hospital. No, she's not a patient at the hospital. She apparently is a nurse at the hospital. She's also in high school. I don't know what's happening here. Anyway, he heads there and he trespasses, is running around mad sus in this uncharacteristically empty hospital. He gets caught though, and despite his best efforts, Christie is in fact killed. He runs off, and we get to see who's responsible. It is our guy Tony, or not really Tony, it's Virgil, and Virgil has possessed Tony's body. Then Tony asks this. And again, I am frustrated because we do not learn the history of Virgil and Michael and Tony. How did they meet before? How was Virgil defeated before? Why is there some weird familiarity? And what happened with this Ouija board prior? But we don't find out. So Michael dives through a glass window to run away from Virgil. He doesn't get dirty or even bloody, and he runs off to sneak back into his room. But as he's doing this, his mom walks in and sees him on the ledge and assumes he's trying to end it all. She calls the doc and she's like, yo, doc, my son is trying to do himself in right now. So he comes over and he's like, I got some drugs. So they sedate him with some real heavy shit. Then his dad comes through. His dad immediately starts arguing with the mom and is like, yo, bitch, you're a lush. He wouldn't be this disaster if it weren't for you. However, they both fucking suck because John comes through just shortly after with a shotgun and kidnaps a very heavily sedated Michael, and none of them seem to notice. When Michael comes through, John attempts to kill him, but he's able to convince John that it wasn't him, that it was Tony, so they head to Tony's crib. But Tony isn't there. They find a crucifix jammed into the wall above Tony's bed. This seems like a kind of just weird minor detail that is just supposed to be creepy, but is also something they took from Elm Street because the crucifix is definitely used heavily in the first half of the movie. It's something we see in Tina's bed in 2 scenes, both when Tina's sleeping in the bed and when Nancy's sleeping in Tina's bed. They decide to wait for Tony, and finally, Michael decides to jack some of Tony's clothes because he wants to get out of those godforsaken pajamas. They watch a spooky movie, and then Tony's face comes to the screen again and is all like, Michael, this dude Virgil is killing everyone and he's about to straight murk Robert, and you gotta stop him, but the only way you could stop him is with this dagger. Michael's being a little puta, and he's not really like, he doesn't believe it, and he's skeptical, and Tony has to prove it's him by doing this. So John gives Michael a gun because apparently he had 2 guns to kill Michael for some reason. And they go to save Robert. They find Robert blackout drunk in his apartment alone with the door open, and they abduct him in his tidy whities. And these morons decide to split up instead of stick together because Robert wants some pantalones. I guess this was also so they could establish this scene where John leaves Robert unattended so that he could cop 3 boxes of Marlboro cigarettes, because 1 wasn't enough. It was either that or a 12-pack of Coke cans. Mexico has a real problem with teen diabetes and lung cancer. Virgil murders Robert and murders John, and then this is where we see a huge flaw in this movie, because Virgil seems to have this ability to be invisible and to kind of teleport, which essentially you would think makes him unstoppable. There's under 20 minutes left, and if you thought it was already crazy, it gets fucking crazier here. Muy loco, muy extraña, if you ask me. Virgil chases Michael with John's whip. The cops end up stopping them, but Michael ends up escaping again. But he heads to Alex's house. So Alex's parents seem to be having this hoity-toity dinner. Oh, and Alex's dad is Archduke Franz Ferdinand or Mr. Monopoly. I get those 2 confused, so excuse me. Dad, of course, wants him out because if you got a stash like that, you got to be sensical. But the guests are all like, nah, let's have this really weird, sus, sweaty, dirty guy join us for dinner, and let's give him some booze while we're at it. Next is the other scene in the top 2 scenes of this movie that's great, because Michael begins to have a vision at the table. So he thinks it's smart to just get up and blindly start shooting his gun everywhere like a maniac. Then Alex is all like, "Stop it!" She delivers that line as if Michael's just telling some silly, offensive joke at the table and not almost murdering everyone. Somehow he's able to get Alex out of the house. She follows him for whatever reason, and no one attempts to really stop them. They go to retrieve the dagger at the last crime scene. As they're there, Virgil appears, and you're wondering, why didn't Virgil just show up there before and get the dagger himself? But no, that just doesn't work for the story. So their first instinct is to hide in this boiler room. And yes, this is another reference to Elm Street. But as you know, this only makes sense in Elm Street because Freddy didn't only commit his vile acts in a boiler room, he also was murdered in the boiler room, and that also made it so that many of the nightmares took place in the boiler room. So there's a backstory there, and it makes sense. After just running around the boiler room for a couple minutes trying to get away from Virgil, Michael tells Alex to just leave, and this also doesn't make sense because Michael has the dagger and Virgil can teleport, but apparently he can't do it when it's most convenient to him. Alex runs off, and Michael ends up finding a way to trap Virgil. Virgil then tricks Michael into dropping the dagger, and once he does that, he makes Michael levitate very high off of the ground. As this is happening, Alex shows up way too quickly with the detective and then murders Virgil/Tony with the dagger, and this causes Michael to fall to his death. This is not it, folks, though. There's one more scene. The last scene is of Michael's funeral. Alex is there and she has the magic rose, but it's all wilting and dying, and and she decides to throw it into the plot as the casket is getting lowered. But as she looks again, the rose is brand new, and then this weird shit happens.
Like the rose is. As long as we love each other, nothing can take us apart. There will always be an open door between us.
It's safe to say that this is another thing. They were just like, let's just take that kind of weird, dreamy ending that Elm Street had. But that movie was about dreams and nightmares. This movie is about visions. And Alex wasn't even the one who was dealing with that. It was Michael. And Elm Street's ending is far from perfect. It wasn't even the ending that Wes Craven wanted. However, it's, like I said, it fits more. Would I recommend this movie? Absolutely 100%. I know it sounds like I'm shitting on it, but everything that is wrong with it makes it completely entertaining and funny, especially when you have like something to compare it to. Finally, let's talk about the art here. Now, I love the art. Actually, even though I have criticisms, I think the aesthetic is really cool, and I just like the style a lot. But who are these people? Was Charlie Sheen cast as like Michael, and it was just too late to fucking change the art? I guess that's supposed to be Alex. It's not, though. Tony definitely looks like a burn victim, which is very interesting. Plus, that necklace plays no part in this movie. It's actually a dagger, and that barely even makes sense as it is, because we get no history on the dagger, backstory. We don't understand why that's the only thing that could kill Virgil. Also, come on, the tagline. Literally them taking a dig at Elm Street, and again, completely dumb, because nightmares have nothing to do with it. I tried to keep the whole composition similar to the original art. I did like how they laid out the characters, but I changed it up a bit, and I wanted to add some more the elements that really stood out to me throughout the movie. There's the Ouija, of course. There's the brows. There's the jammies. There's the Virgil. But yeah, like, this was totally fun for me, and I really like it, even if you don't. But I really hope you do. So comment below. Maybe you have something to say about the art, but maybe you also have something to say about the movie. Maybe you think the movie is better than Elm Street or more successful. And maybe you think the concept is scarier. Because honestly, I think the concept of not being able to go to sleep because some supernatural killer might get me and then kill me in real life is pretty fucking scary. Not being able to go to sleep just in and of itself is terrifying, because sleep is awesome. Yay for sleep. Give a thumbs up for sleep, please. But yeah, like, subscribe, and comment, please. And until next time, peace.